Greetings to everyone! I am glad to present you the first episode of my Egyptology video podcasts for Amon-Ra membership community. This episode is made public and freely available as a free preview to my Egyptology video podcasts on Amon-Ra membership community. This is the first episode of a series of video podcasts dedicated to the Inner Sanctuary of the God Ra-Harakhty in the temple of millions of years of King Sethi I at Abydos. Here you can see the interior of the Inner Sanctuary of Ra-Harakhty, looking toward its background wall with its Ka door, also known as the False Door. This series of video podcasts constitutes a guide to the Inner Sanctuary of Ra-Harakhty, in which I will describe and analyze all the offering rituals, the scenes and the deities represented, providing also the English translation of the titles of the ritual scenes and of all the gods' epithets. My purpose is to create a complete and detailed religious guide that is both ritual and theological. Abydos is one of the most ancient and most sacred cities of Egypt, and is one of the most important seats of the god Osiris. It is located in the 8th nome of Upper Egypt, whose name is the Great Land, and whose capital city is Tinis, the homeland of the first two dynasties and the first capital of Egypt. In the photo, the temple of millions of years of King Sethi I at Abydos, looking from the first court toward the second court and the portico. The temple of millions of years of King Sethi I at Abydos is one of the most beautiful and enchanting temples of Egypt. The construction of this temple began during the reign of King Sethi I, and it was completed during the reign of his son and successor, King Ramses II. Here you can see the plan of the temple. In the inner core of this temple there are 7 inner sanctuaries, and this is indeed an unique feature which is not present in any other Egyptian temple. The 7 inner sanctuaries are dedicated respectively to King Sethi I, Ptah, Ra-Harakhty, Amon-Ra, Osiris, Isis and Horus. This first episode is dedicated to the exterior face of the entrance gate of the Inner Sanctuary of Ra-Harakhty. Ra-Harakhty is the combined form of Ra and Harakhty united together as a single deity. Harakhty is Horus, he of the horizon, but in the combined form of Ra-Harakhty, Harakhty means Horus of the two horizons. Therefore, Ra-Harakhty is Ra-Horus of the two horizons. Here you can see the exterior face of the entrance gate of the Inner Sanctuary of Ra-Harakhty, looking towards its interior. On the exterior face of the entrance gate are represented a total of 12 scenes, 6 on the jambs plus 2 on the lower friezes and 4 on the lintel. The king represented is always Sethi I. Now I will describe and analyze in detail each scene. On the lower frieze of the south jamb, at left, are represented Thoth and Ear, the god of sight, both kneeling on a mat. The name of Thoth is written here, and here's the name of Ear. Thoth is represented ibis-headed, holding a scribe's palette in his left hand and a pen in his right hand. He writes on the notched palm branch, the so-called ear staff, the jubilees of the king. Ear, the god of sight, wears a wig and a false beard. He holds a container in his right hand and raises his left hand in blessing. On the lower frieze of the north jamb, at right, are represented Thoth and Sejam, the god of hearing, both kneeling on a mat. The scene is almost identical to the previous one. The name of Thoth is no longer visible, while here's the name of Sejam. The image of Thoth is badly damaged, but it is still visible that he is represented ibis-headed and holding a scribe's palette in his left hand. Even if the image is damaged, surely he was represented holding a pen in his right hand and writing the jubilees of the king on the ear staff, exactly like in the previous scene. Sejam, the god of hearing, wears a wig and a false beard. He holds a container in his left hand and raises his right hand in blessing. On the lower register of the south jamb is represented the king carrying a tray with food offerings to Ra-Harakhty. Among the offerings there are loaves and fowl. The name of Ra-Harakhty is written here, Ra-Harakhty, together with his epithet, the Lord of the Sky. The title of the offering ritual is written here, carrying the offerings to his father, that he may do the giving of life like Ra. Ra-Harakhty is represented falcon-headed, on his forehead the Ureus. He wears the Atif crown with 2 solar discs, 2 ostrich feathers and ram's horns, with 2 Urei each wearing the solar disc. He holds in his right hand the Uaz scepter of power and dominion. His left arm is no longer visible, but surely he was represented holding the Ankh, the symbol of life, in his left hand. The king wears the blue crown with the Ureus on his forehead. Above the king is depicted the solar disk representing Horus of Bedet, with the 2 goddesses Nekhbet and Outo as Urei. At left, Nekhbet with the white crown, and at right, Outo with the red crown. The scene represented on the lower register of the North Jam is badly damaged. It is still visible the king carrying a tray with food offerings exactly like in the previous scene. The image of the deity who receives the offerings is no longer visible, but almost surely it is Ra-Harakhty. Since the deity who receives the offering in the middle register of both jams is the same, and also the deity who receives the offerings in the upper registers is the same, almost surely the same is true also here. The king wears the blue crown with the Ureus on his forehead. Above the king is still visible the solar disk with the 2 goddesses Nekhbet and Outo as Urei. At right there is Outo with the red crown. The image of Nekhbet at left is damaged, but surely she was represented wearing the white crown exactly like in the previous scene. On the middle register of the South Jam is represented the king presenting a statuette of Maat to Atum. Maat, the goddess of righteousness and truth, is depicted wearing the headband diadem with the ostrich feather on her head and holding the Ankh. The name of Atum is written here, Atum, together with his epithets, Great God, the Lord of the Sky. The title of the offering ritual is written here, presenting Maat to his father. Atum wears the double crown and the false beard. He holds the Ankh in his left hand and the Uaz scepter in his right hand, with which he gives the Ankh to the king. The king wears the false beard and a wig with the Ureus on his forehead. Above the king is represented the solar disk with the 2 goddesses Nekhbet and Outo as Urei. At left, Nekhbet with the white crown, and at right, Outo with the red crown. The scene represented on the middle register of the North Jam is almost identical to the previous one. The king is represented presenting a statuette of Maat to Atum. Maat is depicted wearing the headband diadem with the ostrich feather on her head and holding the Ankh. The name of Atum is written here, Atum, together with his epithets, the Lord of the 2 lands and of On. On, known in Greek as Heliopolis, is the capital city of the 13th nome of Lower Egypt, and it is the most important seat of Ra. The title of the offering ritual is written here, presenting righteousness and truth to his father, that he may do the giving of life. Atum wears the double crown and the false beard. He holds the Ankh in his right hand and the Uaz scepter in his left hand, with which he gives the Ankh and the Uaz scepter to the king. The king wears the false beard and a wig with the Ureus on his forehead. Above the king is represented the solar disk with the 2 goddesses Nekhbet and Outo as Urei, both with the Ankh. At left, Nekhbet with the white crown, and at right, Outo with the red crown. On the upper register of the South Jam is represented the king presenting a statuette of himself kneeling and offering 2 ointment jars to Ra-Harakhty. The name of Ra-Harakhty is written here, Ra-Harakhty, together with his epithets, Great God, the Lord of the Sky, he who resides in the temple of the Mat of Ra endures. The Mat of Ra endures is the name of King Sethi I as king of Upper and Lower Egypt, and the temple of the Mat of Ra endures is the temple of millions of years of King Sethi I at Abydos. Ra-Harakhty is represented falcon-headed and wearing the solar disk encircled by the Ureus. He holds the ankh in his left hand and the Ua scepter in his right hand, with which he gives the ankh to the king. The king wears a wig with the Ureus on his forehead. Between the king and Ra-Harakhty, two altars, each with a jar of water topped by a lotus flower. Above the king, Nekhbet in her form of vulture, spreading her wings in protection and holding the Shen ring, which is the symbol of eternal protection. Her name is written here, Nekhbet, together with her epithet, the Lady of the Sky. The scene represented on the upper register of the Norse Jam is almost identical to the previous one. The king is represented presenting a statuette of himself kneeling and offering 2 ointment jars to Ra-Harakhty. The name of Ra-Harakhty is written here, Ra-Harakhty, together with his epithets, Great God, the Lord of the Sky. He who resides in the temple of the Mat of Ra endures. May he give all life and dominion like Ra. Ra-Harakhty is represented falcon-headed and wearing the solar disk encircled by the Ureus. He holds the ankh in his right hand and the Ua scepter in his left hand. The king wears a wig with the Ureus on his forehead. Between the king and Ra-Harakhty, 2 altars, each with a jar of water topped by a lotus flower. Above the king, Outo in her form of vulture, spreading her wings in protection and holding the Shen ring. Her name is written here, Outo, together with her epithet, the Lady of the Sky. Here's the lintel of the exterior face of the entrance gate. On the top, the solar orb, representing Horus of Bedet, with the 2 goddesses Nekhbet and Outo as Urei. At left, Nekhbet with the white crown, and at right, Outo with the red crown. Bedet, also known as Edfu, is the capital city of the second nome of Upper Egypt. The solar orb is flanked by the cartouches with the names of King Sethi I as son of Ra and as king of Upper and Lower Egypt. There are 9 cartouches at left and 9 cartouches at right. Each cartouche is depicted above the neb basket, whose meaning is Lord, and is topped by the 2 ostrich feathers crown with the solar disk. Here's one of the cartouches with the name of King Sethi I as son of Ra, he who belongs to Seth, the beloved of Ptah and Osiris. And here's one of the cartouches with the name of King Sethi I as king of Upper and Lower Egypt. The Mat of Ra endures. To the left, Nekhbet in her form of Ureus, wearing the white crown and represented above lily flowers. In front of her, the Ua scepter with the Shen ring. Her name is written here, Nekhbet, together with her epithet, the White One of Nekhen. The hieroglyphs written here say, may she give life and dominion. Nekhen, known in Greek as Hierakonpolis, is a city located in the 3rd nome of Upper Egypt. To the right, Outo in her form of Ureus, represented above papyrus flowers. The image is badly damaged, but surely she was represented wearing the red crown. In front of her, there was scepter with the Shen ring. Below are represented 4 scenes. The scenes at left and right are identical. On both scenes, Thoth gives the ankh with the Ua scepter to the king and holds his hand while leading him towards the central scenes. Thoth is represented ibis-headed and wears the lunar disk with the crescent. The king wears the blue crown with the Ureus on his forehead and holds the Eka scepter. On both scenes, Thoth is preceded by 2 standards, the standard of Outo in his form of wolf, with the Ureus and the ostrich feather, and the Tekenu standard. At right, the image of the Tekenu standard is badly damaged. On the scene at right, the standard of Outo is carried by a personified Ua scepter, and the Tekenu standard is carried by a personified ankh. The scene at left is badly damaged, but almost surely also here the standard of Outo was carried by a personified Ua scepter and the Tekenu standard was carried by a personified ankh. The two scenes in the middle of the lintel are badly damaged and are no longer visible. As concerns the rituals represented here, since in the middle of the lintel of the entrance gates of all other inner sanctuaries of this temple, excluding the inner sanctuary of King Sethi I, is represented at left the king running with the whore and the flail, and at right the king running with two libation vases, almost surely the same rituals were represented also here. On the scene at right, above the image of the king, there is the solar disk with the two uraei. As concerns the deities represented, at left probably there was Ra-Harakhty, and it is still visible that he was represented wearing the solar disk. The hieroglyphs written here say, "He who resides" and "May he give." At left was represented Khepri, as attested by the hieroglyphs written here. Khepri, he who resides in the temple of the Mat of Ra endures. May he give life, stability and dominion. It is still visible that Khepri was represented wearing the solar disk encircled by the ureus. Here ends the first episode dedicated to the exterior face of the entrance gate of the Inner Sanctuary of Ra-Harakhty in the temple of millions of years of King Sethi I at Abydos. Thanks to all for watching and hearing.